So, we've been talking about stress and like it's a bad thing. And certainly it's not something that most of us want in our lives, but it's not all bad. And that's really our message today. So, as we're thinking about stress, there are certainly some advantages to living in a world without it. And if I had a magic wand, probably you'd be there voting that I just make it all disappear. So, some of the advantages of living in a world without stress is perhaps fewer physical health problems, better mental health, less anxious, less burnout, more relaxed. And I'm saying perhaps for these because maybe there would be, some problems in terms of making that happen. So we might be less motivated to make our physical and mental health as positive as possible. And we maybe our lack of motivation might mean that we're less productive and less motivated for self-improvement, less self-preservation, less ambition, less able to identify problems, and a lack of balance. In the last video, I said, that we typically take any of a number of responses to a stressor: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And there is nothing necessarily good or bad about these if they are working for us and if we are not stuck there. If I am constantly feeling like the only way that I can handle stress is by pleasing everybody around me, that's probably not a good way of responding. Or if I freeze in response to everything, not so good. Okay? So positive stress in general, is brief and prepares us to deal with problems. Tolerable stress tends to be more serious, more temporary, and it tends to be buffered by supportive relationships with family and friends or work colleagues. Where we get into toxic stress, we're talking about prolonged activation of stress in the absence of, sufficient protective relationships or coping. So it's a matter of balance that we're looking at here. Rollo May talks about this in a little bit different way. Rollo May is an existential psychotherapist and is thinking about how do we behave in our world. And he says some anxiety is neurotic. And, if in response to a stressor, we feel paralyzed, we freeze, that's not so good. Okay? Some anxiety is useful and motivating. So we get a little bit anxious about an exam and we start studying. Or we are concerned about our relationship with a friend, and so we talk to that friend. That's good. The anxiety helps us to handle that situation. The third kind is existential anxiety, and he says it forces us to examine our values. Often this is in response to something big. So, for example, a relationship breaks up. We step back and we think, so what happened here? Is it happening, am I handling relationships in the best way possible? What should I do differently? And certainly we could expect that people who experienced some sort of trauma might experience some existential anxiety. So as we're going through, you can kind of hear me saying, asking these questions. Does the stress and our way of coping with it help us solve that problem in the short run and in the long run? So some things help in the short run. Having a second bowl of ice cream may in the short run feel good, and in the long run cause a variety of problems and maybe interfere with our way of handling things. Does it create other problems? Smoking feels like it reduces stress for people, and yet the research suggests that it in fact increases stress, and it also leads to a variety of health problems. And does it leave you feeling better about yourself? So if it doesn't leave you feeling better about who you are, if you're handling stress by lifting items from the local Walmart, and then you start feeling like a thief and a bad person, that's not very helpful. Okay. All in all, we're saying match our stress to the kind of stressor that we're experiencing. So if I am approaching a task that's very simple, circling the number of E's on a page, then I need a fair amount of arousal in order to keep going at it. Otherwise, why would I want to do it? For a complicated task, such as taking a final exam, we want our level of arousal lower so that we're able to concentrate and think as clearly as possible in response to that situation. For many situations, we're going to be in the middle, where we want some arousal, not too much, not too little. So think in terms of Goldilocks here, trying to find the right amount for that particular situation. As we're thinking about stress then, we're thinking about it as kind of a double-edged sword. It has advantages and it has disadvantages. And we want to be aware of both pieces. So this is sometimes referred to, or, in terms of Weiji, which is a Chinese term describing crisis. That is, that crisis has both risk and it can also offer an opportunity. So we need to be aware of both pieces and think about how we're going to approach that situation. We want to do this using a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset, we're saying, I can't do this. This is too hard. If we make a mistake, we feel like we're a failure. Growth mindset is trying to recognize that problems are things that we can learn from. We may make mistakes and do better next time. We can learn even from our mistakes. And I think this idea of growth mindset is certainly one way that I want you to approach your learning, but also that it can be very helpful in terms of approaching life. How can you handle things better? So ultimately, let's think about stress as an opportunity, or at least potentially an opportunity, where you can become aware of a problem, commit to change, develop new coping skills and competencies, reflect on and recognize values and strengths and grow from them and become more aware of your social support system and become more empathic. And with this, I'm going to say goodbye and have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.